I'm allowed to have a past, she said when I found photos of her ex all over her phone. You're right. My girlfriend's phone held a secret gallery, and every picture was a ghost I was competing with. Hey everyone, before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button if you want more stories just like this. Thanks for the support. My name is Liam, and I was 28 years old when I learned that the most dangerous ghosts aren't the ones in our heads, but the ones living in our phones. The one I was living with was named Clara. She was 26, with eyes the color of warm honey and a laugh that could make you forget the world was anything but kind. We'd been together for 2 years, sharing a small apartment that always smelled like her vanilla candle and the coffee I brewed every morning. On the surface, it was perfect. We were that couple, the one that finished each other's sentences, that cooked together on weekends, that had inside jokes for everything. I thought we were a fortress built on a foundation of trust and a shared future. I was a fool. The first crack in that foundation appeared on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday night. We were curled up on the couch, a half-watched documentary playing on the TV. Clara had fallen asleep, her head resting on my shoulder, her breathing soft and even. Her phone, which had been in her hand, slipped onto the cushion between us. The screen lit up with a notification, and for no reason other than pure, idle curiosity, I picked it up. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear I wasn't. I just wanted to see the time. But my thumb, clumsy in the dim light, swiped instead of tapping. The photo gallery opened, and there it was, a folder right at the top labeled with a simple heart emoji. It wasn't our folder. Our photos were in a mess of camera rolls and screenshots. This was different. This was curated. I tapped on it, and my world tilted on its axis. It was her. And it was him. Her ex, Julian. Hundreds of photos. Not just old, grainy pictures from a life she'd lived before me. These were recent. In one, they were at a beach I didn't recognize, her sun-kissed face turned up to his, a smile on her lips that I hadn't seen in a very long time. In another, they were in a dimly lit restaurant, his hand covering hers on the table. There were selfies, candid shots, pictures of them laughing, of them looking at each other with a kind of intensity that felt like a physical blow to my chest. I scrolled, my heart hammering against my ribs, a cold dread seeping into my veins. These weren't just memories, this was an archive, a shrine. I must have made a sound, a sharp intake of breath, because Clara stirred beside me. Her eyes fluttered open, and she saw the phone in my hand. She saw what I was looking at. But she didn't look panicked. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. Annoyed that I had found her. Annoyed that her private world had been breached. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and plucked the phone from my numb fingers. Her words, when they came, were not an apology. They were a defense, a justification. She said she was allowed to have a past, that these photos meant nothing, that they were just memories, a part of her history that she wasn't ashamed of. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of defiance and pity, as if I were a child who didn't understand the complexities of adult life. And the worst part was, a part of me wanted to believe her. A part of me wanted to be the cool, understanding boyfriend, the one who wasn't threatened by a ghost. So I nodded. I said she was right. I told her I was sorry for snooping. We went to bed that night, a chasm of unspoken things opening up between us in the darkness. But as I lay there, listening to her even breathing, I couldn't shake the feeling. It wasn't the past that was on her phone. It was the present, carefully preserved and hidden. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this wasn't over. I had to know the truth. The next few days were an exercise in cognitive dissonance. I tried to play the part of the reformed boyfriend, the one who had accepted her explanation and moved on. I made coffee. I kissed her goodbye. I asked about her day. But every interaction was laced with a new, poisonous awareness. I was no longer just her boyfriend. I was an audience member in a play where I didn't know the script. My mind became a detective's office, running on a constant loop of suspicion. Every time she picked up her phone, my muscles tensed. Every time she laughed at a text, I wondered who was on the other end. The phrase, "I'm allowed to have a past," echoed in my head, but it was starting to sound less like a reasonable statement and more like a well-rehearsed line. A past doesn't get updated with new photos. A past doesn't live in a folder marked with a heart emoji. The urge to know more was a physical itch under my skin. I fought it, telling myself I was crossing a line, that I was violating the very trust I claimed to accept. But the image of her face, smiling at Julian, was burned into my retinas. It was a competition I didn't know I was in, and I was losing. The opportunity presented itself a few days later. I was working on my laptop in the living room when I realized I was logged into her social media account. She must have used it a few days prior and forgotten to log out. My heart hammered. This was the door. All I had to do was turn the knob. I stared at the screen, my cursor hovering over her profile picture. A war raged inside me. Respect for her privacy versus the desperate, gnawing need for the truth. The need won. It was a cowardly move, I know, but I felt I had been pushed into a corner. I started with her profile, scrolling back through years of posts and photos. It was the usual stuff: friends, family, vacations. But then I started looking closer. At the tagged photos, at the comments. I found him. Julian. His profile was private, a fortress wall I couldn't breach, but his profile picture was public, and it was of him and Clara. They were at a Christmas market, bundled up in scarves and hats, holding steaming mugs of what looked like mulled wine. They looked impossibly happy, impossibly together. And the date the photo was posted? Just 10 months ago. We had been together for over a year at that point. A cold knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't ancient history. This was recent. I began to dig, following digital breadcrumbs. I looked at their mutual friends, scanning their public pages for any mention of either of them. It was tedious, mind-numbing work, but I was fueled by a sickening cocktail of adrenaline and dread. And then I hit pay dirt. A public post on a mutual friends page from just 3 weeks ago. It was a picture of a group of people at a bar, the caption something about a welcome home party for someone. I scanned the faces in the background, and there he was, Julian. And sitting next to him, leaning in as if to share a secret, was Clara. It was a night she had told me she was having a late-night study session at the library for her master's degree. The lie was so blatant, so brazen, it almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, it just made me feel sick. I clicked on the friend who had posted the photo. Their profile was public. I started scrolling through their photo albums, looking for more proof, more pieces of this puzzle I was desperately trying to assemble. I found an album from a birthday bonfire a month prior, the night she claimed she was too tired from work to go out. I scanned the photos, my eyes searching, my heart pounding. And then I saw it. Not just Clara, but a photo of her and Julian, their faces illuminated by the firelight, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. They weren't just in the same place. They were together, intimately. The web of lies was growing thicker, more intricate with every click. I wasn't just looking at photos anymore. I was looking at a map of her deception. The world outside my laptop screen ceased to exist. The sounds of the city, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, they all faded into a dull roar, muffled by the roaring in my own ears. I was an archaeologist of a relationship that was already dead, and I was digging up its bones. Each photo was a fossil, each tagged post a piece of evidence in a case I was building against the woman I thought I loved. The bonfire photo was the smoking gun, but I needed more. I needed the entire arsenal. I became obsessed. I created a mental timeline, cross-referencing her lies with the digital proof I was unearthing. There was the girls' weekend to the coast, a trip she came back from distant and distracted. I found a geotagged photo on a mutual friends page taken at a seafood shack on that exact same weekend. In the background, visible through a window, were Clara and Julian sharing a plate of oysters. There was the work conference in a city 2 hours away. I found a check-in from Julian at a coffee shop in that same city on the same day, with a comment from a friend saying, "Hope you and Clara have a great time." Each discovery was a fresh stab to the heart, but the pain was starting to be replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't a mistake. This was a double life. She was a master of compartmentalization, a magician who made her other world disappear every time she walked through our apartment door. The most painful part was the ease with which she lied. She would look me straight in the eye, her expression open and sincere, and spin a tale so convincing I had no reason not to believe her. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was making a fool of me. I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was the heartbreak, of course, a deep, profound ache that felt like it would swallow me whole. But there was also anger, a white-hot rage at her audacity. And beneath it all, a chilling sense of detachment. I was no longer Liam, her boyfriend. I was an investigator, and she was my subject. I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't talk her way out of. Photos and social media posts could be explained away. "Oh, we just ran into each other. It was a group thing. He was just there." I needed something more concrete, something that left no room for interpretation. My mind raced, trying to think of every possible avenue. Her phone was locked tight, a fortress I couldn't breach again. Her laptop was password protected. But then a memory surfaced, an old, forgotten piece of technology. A few years ago, we had bought a tablet together, mostly for watching movies in bed and for her to use for her schoolwork. We had since upgraded, and the old one was now gathering dust in the back of my closet. It was slow, the battery was shot, but it still worked. And most importantly, we had used a shared cloud account for it, an account she still used to back up her phone data just in case. It was a long shot, a desperate Hail Mary pass, but it was the only one I had. I walked to the closet, my hands trembling slightly. I pushed past old shoes and forgotten jackets, my fingers closing around the cool, smooth surface of the tablet. I pulled it out, wiping a layer of dust off the screen. I found the charging cable, plugged it in, and waited. As the little white Apple logo appeared on the screen, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the point of no return. If what I suspected was true, this little device held the keys to her entire secret kingdom. I just had to find the right door. The tablet hummed to life, its screen flickering with the sluggishness of old age. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs as I navigated to the settings. There it was, the cloud account, signed in and active. My hand felt slick with sweat as I tapped on the icon for the photo backups. It took a moment to sync, a spinning wheel of doom that felt like it lasted an eternity. And then it opened. It was a tidal wave of her digital life, stretching back years. Our photos were there, yes, but so was everything else. And I mean everything. It was like getting a master key to her mind. I started with the most recent backups, my eyes scanning the thumbnails. I found the photos from the bonfire, from the restaurant, from the girls' weekend. They were all here, in high resolution, stored for posterity. But it was the next folder that made my blood run cold. It wasn't photos. It was a folder labeled Notes, a place where she must have saved drafts of messages or important information. I opened it, and there they were. Entire conversations, backed up from a messaging app she must have deleted from her phone, but not from the cloud. They were between her and Julian. I started reading, and the words on the screen felt like acid, burning through my last shred of hope. These weren't the innocent messages of two exes catching up. They were intimate, raw, and utterly devastating. They were filled with inside jokes I had never been a part of, memories they were constantly reliving. He called her C. She called him Jules. They talked about a future, a someday when they could finally be together, no more secrets. I scrolled back, my eyes devouring the betrayal. I read about their secret meetups, the ones I had already uncovered, and others I hadn't. A quick lunch between meetings, a walk in a park on the other side of town. They were living an entire life in the margins of mine. And then I found it, the conversation that broke me completely. It was from a month ago. Julian had sent a message. It was a single, gut-wrenching question. "When are you going to end it with him, C? I can't do this anymore." And her reply, which came a few hours later, made me feel like I was suffocating. "Soon, I promise. After our vacation. I just need to have one last good memory with him to make it easier. It's not fair to him otherwise." Our vacation? The trip to the mountains we had just booked for next month. The one she was so excited about. The one she was planning down to the last detail. It wasn't a vacation. It was a farewell tour. A final, kind gesture before she ripped my heart out. I leaned back against the couch, the tablet feeling heavy in my hands. The air in the room felt thick, toxic. All the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying finality. Her occasional sadness, her moments of distance, her insistence on planning the perfect trip. It all made sense now. It wasn't love. It was guilt. She was curating an ending. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I had to put the tablet down, my hands shaking too violently to hold it. I got up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. They looked blurry, indistinct. The life I thought I had, the future I was so sure of, had just been revealed as an elaborate illusion. I wasn't in a relationship. I was a placeholder, a chapter she was waiting to close. And as I stood there, the shock began to recede, replaced by something else. Something cold and hard and clear. The heartbreak was still there, a deep, throbbing pain, but it was now accompanied by a strange, steely resolve. I had all the proof I needed. It was no longer a suspicion. It was a documented fact, and I knew with absolute certainty what I had to do next. The next few hours passed in a surreal, slow-motion haze. I felt like an actor in a movie, going through the motions while my real self watched from a distance. I copied the most damning evidence from the tablet onto a flash drive. The photos, the conversations, the plans. A neat, tidy little package of betrayal. Then I formulated a plan. I didn't want a screaming match. I didn't want a dramatic, tearful confrontation where she could try to manipulate me with excuses and apologies. I wanted it to be clean, clinical. I wanted to present her with the truth and watch it dismantle her world, just as it had dismantled mine. I packed a bag, just the essentials, a few changes of clothes, my toiletries, my laptop. I moved it to my car, placing it quietly in the trunk. The act felt final, a period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. Then I went back inside and waited. I sat on the couch, the tablet resting on the coffee table in front of me, the screen displaying the conversation about our farewell vacation. I felt a strange sense of calm. The storm of emotions had passed, leaving behind this quiet, unnerving stillness. When I heard her key on the lock, my heart didn't even skip a beat. I was ready. She came in, her face bright and cheerful, talking about a funny thing that had happened at work. She dropped her bag by the door, came over to the couch, and gave me a kiss on the cheek, just like she always did. She asked me how my day was. I told her it was fine. I asked her about hers. I played my part perfectly, the oblivious, loving boyfriend. She chatted away, completely unaware that the ground was about to give way beneath her feet. When she paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was quiet, even. I told her I had something to show her. I didn't look at her. I just picked up the tablet and turned it around, placing it on her lap. I watched her face as her eyes scanned the screen. I saw the initial confusion, the casual glance turning into a focused stare. I saw the color drain from her face, the way her mouth fell open slightly. I saw her eyes flick back and forth, reading the words she thought had been deleted forever, the words that sealed her fate. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a horror so profound it was almost satisfying. The confident, defiant woman from the other night was gone, replaced by a trapped, terrified animal. She opened her mouth to speak, to launch into the lies I knew were already forming in her head. But I held up a hand, stopping her. The silence that filled the room was heavier than any words could have been. I wasn't interested in her excuses. I wasn't interested in her tears. I was only interested in one thing, making sure she understood that I knew. I pointed to the screen, to the part where she talked about our vacation. I looked her directly in the eye, and for the first time, I let her see the cold, hard truth of what I was feeling. There was no anger in my gaze, no sadness, just a vast, empty void where our relationship used to be. I watched as the last vestiges of hope crumbled in her expression. She knew it was over. She knew that I knew. The performance was finished. The curtain had fallen. The silence in the room was a living thing. It pressed in on us, thick with unspoken accusations and the shattered remnants of our life together. Clara stared at me, her face a mask of pale, ashen shock. The lies had died on her lips, and now there was nothing left. No defense, no explanation, no cleverly worded justification. There was only the cold, hard evidence glowing on the screen of the tablet and the devastating finality in my eyes. I finally broke the silence. My voice was quiet, devoid of emotion, which I think scared her more than any outburst of rage would have. I told her I wasn't angry. I told her I was just disappointed. I recounted the journey that had led me to this moment, not with accusations, but with a calm, methodical narration of facts. I mentioned the photos on her phone and how her claim that she was allowed to have a past had felt wrong from the start. I told her about the social media deep dive, the bonfire photo, the girls' weekend lie. With each detail I revealed, I watched her flinch, as if each word was a physical blow. I wanted her to know the extent of my discovery. I wanted her to understand that this wasn't a hunch or a misunderstanding. It was a fully realized, meticulously documented case of her betrayal. I saved the worst for last. I pointed to the tablet again, to the conversation about our vacation. I told her that reading that was the moment I knew, the moment the last piece of my heart broke. I said that her line, "I'm allowed to have a past," was the most insulting part of it all, because it was never about the past. It was about a very active, very present secret life she was living right under my nose. I told her that the only thing she was right about was that she was allowed to have a past. What she wasn't allowed to do was lie about her present and sacrifice my future in the process. When I was finished, I stood up. I told her my bag was packed. I told her I didn't want the apartment or the furniture or any of it. She could have it all. It was all tainted anyway. I just wanted to leave. I walked towards the door, my movements feeling strangely light, as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. She didn't try to stop me. She just sat there, a statue carved from grief and regret, her eyes fixed on the tablet in her lap. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, not looking back. I didn't slam the door, I just closed it gently, a quiet, final click that echoed the closing of that chapter in my life. As I walked down the stairs and out into the cool night air, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't expected. The heartbreak was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was just a scar, a reminder of a battle I had fought and lost, but a battle I was now walking away from with my head held high. I got in my car and started to drive, with no destination in mind. The city lights blurred past me, a smear of color and light. I was leaving behind the ghosts in her phone, the lies, and the woman I thought she was. And as I drove away into the vast, unknown expanse of the future, I knew one thing for sure. I was finally free.